So thanks for Gabrielle and Ricardo to join us. Thanks for David, who isn't being seen on the video right now. Quick introduction. Gabrielle was my first mentor on my path to becoming a certified Scrum trainer. I owe her a lot in that sense, and now I owe her even more now that she's participating in this conference. Ricardo and I met at hardware training, which was fascinating because he owns a restaurant and is one of the leading, or maybe the leading source for applying Scrum in the restaurant business. And I think we will hear more about this during this talk. So with no further ado, I would just pass over to Gabrielle and Ricardo, and hopefully David throughout this talk. Again, let the questions come in through the chat. Gabby, your stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Saurabh. So I'm very pleased to be here today. And when I first said yes, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. But because we're all in this pandemic and going through the same journey, I thought an interesting take would be how we can deal and innovate in a crisis. Now, I'm joined today by Ricardo Moretti. He's coming to us from London. Say hi, Ricardo. Can we hear you?
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. I think it's 1 o'clock in Germany, but I'm sure there are people from all over the world. It's great to be here. Really lovely.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how he literally pivoted his business model in 5 hours to a completely new one to deal with the pandemic. The third of our party, David Hopley. David is a former deputy commander in the Special Forces, and we've been collaborating on Mobius and this idea of purpose-led, outcome-driven innovation for the last 7 years. So we're going to take a journey using something called the Mobius loop, which I'm going to walk through in a moment. And we're going to talk about how we can structure our work so that we can deal with the current crisis. And I realized this morning when I woke up, I had this really happy moment where I thought about, as an Agile community, how we, what gets us out of bed in the morning? And I'm sure we all have that moment. Are we making a difference? And when you hear about Ricardo's story, I think it's extremely inspirational. And I felt actually really positive and energized talking about it through this time. So this is something that as a community, I think we should feel proud of, that we're able to get these great ideas out there and make a difference so people can survive in this difficult time. So we're going to talk through Mobius. So Mobius is a navigator. It's a way that we can create our innovation processes, and there's a big focus on purpose and outcome delivery. So often I find that in the Agile world, we'll often get caught up in delivering a lot of features faster, and we have that time of, are we delivering the right thing? So Mobius pushes us to make sure that we're getting that balance. On the left, we have what we call the discovery loop. This is really why we want to understand purpose, why we're doing something, and how we create the measurable outcomes. Now, these become our compass so that we can steer, especially in a time of crisis. You need to really have your bearings and be able to stay on track. In the middle, we have the decision pivot. So in the decision pivot, we're coming up with ideas. What are the things that will help us create the outcomes? And what you're looking for is to find the most outcomes for the least effort. So when I find with Agile teams that we are simply creating backlogs and prioritizing without having gone through enough of a discovery journey, then we can build the wrong thing simply faster. And over on the right loop, this will be very familiar to us. It looks a bit like a Scrum iteration. This is where we see Scrum, Lean Startup, Kanban. And the idea is validate our ideas rapidly. What changes in a crisis is we tend to live in the decision pivot. We're having to very rapidly do discovery. And you'll hear from Ricardo how he takes these very guerrilla tactics to get the feedback he needs for his customers, and how we can deliver and validate them rapidly. As you'll see, there's an extra kind of arrow. What this is telling us is we have this learn and adapt cycle where we're saying, hey, did that actually pay off? Did we make a difference? Did we improve the outcomes? If yes, and we want to do more, go to the right loop. If not, maybe we didn't understand the problems or our customers' needs deeply enough. And David, we've still lost. He was going to do this brilliant part in a moment, but I'll try and do it for him. So where has Mobius been used? A lot of places. It's a very common pattern. You're going to look at it and think, well, that looks pretty simple. And there's a reason for that. We want to create these patterns we use in very different places. So David Hopley and I met because he said, it's interesting. When I was in Special Forces and training my teams, we use this very similar pattern. And so that's how we started working on bringing these ideas together. You can see it's been used by Red Hat Innovation Labs. As far as social entrepreneurship in places like Pakistan, and a friend, Kuber Shirazi, has even taken it into Yemen, so literally using it in a war zone. So this is all an open model, open platform, so people can get started and use it very easily. Now there's seven main steps we're going to go through today. There's actually 10 around the loop. So the big question is to start with why. This is the idea of very purpose-led leadership, having a strong sense of identity. We go out and observe what's really going on. So this means I look at this as a journey with the whole team and actually across teams in an organization. Instead of simply saying, well, research is on the left, do some design thinking as a phase and throw it over the fence. This is where we all need to be in that journey of discovery together, and we do that rapidly. Out of this, we create our measurable outcomes. Again, this idea of a compass. One of the reasons you'll see this term measurable outcomes is that it's not about the metrics. I see these often imposed down in organizations. It's about having clarity, linking the outcomes back to your purpose. Then in the middle, we have this decision pivot to create multiple options. So we're often simultaneously running these options, but doing small batches, making sure that in the system, we can test something out, validate it rapidly, and understand the impact on the entire ecosystem. Over to the right, we want to take action. So decide what's the least amount we could do to understand, is this option worth delivering or not? We're constantly measuring and validating the impact of that. You know, both the positive and negative impacts, not just on our immediate view, but looking at the broader picture. One thing I learned from David, which I really love, is the idea, because we apply this to bigger picture strategy all the way down to smaller tactical delivery. And he said, you know, when you're a commander, you're looking, this idea of commander's intent, you're looking at the big picture. You have this big view, right? Big peripheral vision. You can see why everything's coming together. But as you go down the levels, it gets narrower and narrower. And so we have this idea of 2 levels up where you want to see what's going on the next levels. And I love that Ricardo, when he said that, he said, but why have 2 levels? Shouldn't we just flatten the whole thing and make sure everybody's able to communicate in the same way? And I think that's true. What we're trying to do, and you'll see with Ricardo's decision making, it's about pushing that down so everybody understands our core purpose, keep it simple, and deliver that. And back to learning. So learn how to adapt and improve, adapt. And this is a continuous cycle that we're doing simultaneously. So we'll often be on the left loop and the right loop. So now, why do we have, well, hopefully have, we'll see if David joins us. I learned something else during our talks where Ricardo said to me, I said, why have you got 2 mobile phones? I noticed one day. And he said, well, that idea of 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So where did you get that from, David, Ricardo?
I don't know. I think I might have got that from some Navy SEAL guys. I think that's what they say. I'm sure I read it in a book or one of these guys, you know, and it applies to all the equipment, you know, whether they got one gun and it doesn't work, then they're dead, you know, so that's their sort of life and death thing. But I think in the restaurant business, it's very similar. You know, we have a very similar situation, you know, where we really are under very, very heavy pressure when we're in a busy service. So, you know, we're always making sure that we have 2 of everything.
And I said that I jinxed it. Between us, we jinxed it actually this morning, because I said, at least there's 3 of us. We've got 2 to back up if one drops out. And Saurabh said, oh, it's been going brilliantly, no technical issues. So right before, it was the kiss of death.
Well, I'm confident he'll pop in at some time anyway.
Yeah, I got to. And if not, we'll do something for everybody afterwards. So if you're wondering, what does a restaurant in London and military have in common? Well, actually, it turns out our patterns of dealing with a crisis are extremely similar. So I'm going to hand you over to Ricardo now. I love him to tell his own story, and I'll jump in if there's things we need to mention. So,
yeah, well, thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you so much. Just to give you a little bit of background, it's kind of why a restaurant in this agile environment. I've been around the restaurant business all my life. I was born 100 yards from my dad's restaurant. And later on in life, I came into restaurants. So in fact, my current restaurant, we celebrate 25 years tomorrow. But I've always felt that the model was broken. And by broken, I mean that the management system that we use for running restaurants just doesn't seem to work anymore. And I'm finding that there's a lot of abuse that comes from managers. Managers feel that they need to rule with an iron fist. they need to be the supreme architects of everything. It feels as though there's an expectation of them to make all the decisions, and they're not pushing decision making down to lower levels. Can you hear me, by the way, Gabrielle?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that really breaks the people underneath management, and I've always felt that, and especially now with Generation X, Generation Z. Apparently 70% of Gen Z, or as they call it in America, have entrepreneurial aspirations. I see David Hotley saying, I'm backstage, can hear everyone and see Gabrielle Ricardo's phone. So
Can you get him on stage?
Maybe we can get him on stage. That's good. But going back on to...
I'm working on that. So you focus on the presentation, I work on David.
Okay. Going back to the new generation, they're highly entrepreneurial. And I think if you put them into the environment with old style management, it just doesn't work, especially the good ones. So if you've got real A players, will not work in that environment. So if you won't get any A players working in that environment, what have you got left? Well, the non-A players, which is not ideal. And I think that when I go back to being the structure being broken, I think that the other element there is the fact that we need decision making to happen in real time. It needs to be super fast. And the old management structure where you go through layers of management in order to make decisions, it just doesn't work. You've got customers with a mobile phone in their hand. If they have a problem, they can trash your reputation in 30 seconds on social media or TripAdvisor or whatever, and that stuff stays online forever. So we're always trying to push decision making down to the very lowest level. And I always had a dream that we could have a flat organization and share information and so on. In 2016, I had to find a way because margins were being squeezed because of exchange rate problems. The government were interfering with payroll, and my payroll expenses went from 25% to 41% in a very short period of time. We just couldn't sustain it. I could see that we would be losing significant money in the years to come, and we had to find another way. About simultaneously to that, I read Scrum book by Jeff Sutherland and Team of Teams, and I kind of got a picture of, wow, there's some other way of running a restaurant. And I got some training. In fact, my first teacher was Joe Justice, who's did the most incredible Scrum at Hardware course in Stockholm, and we got to hang out with Henrik Nyberg and have a lot of fun in Sweden, and it just introduced me to that whole community, and everybody was really excited about how we could take Scrum into a restaurant, and Joe's been a tremendous help, and we've become great friends. He's even been down to the restaurant and done some cooking with us and had a lot of fun.
Joe's speaking this afternoon, so his on hardware and innovation. It's fantastic. So let's talk about the pandemic and how that affected you, because I want your take on it, because you were in the UK at the time. I know that a lot was going on with what was the strategy.
Yeah, it was difficult because right at the very beginning, the government said that they were taking a very sort of herd immunity approach, and that they were going to leave everything open. And very, very quickly, they had a change of heart and policy change. And suddenly we were told in 3 or 4 days' time, we're going to close restaurants. I think we were told it on the Tuesday, and they aimed to close restaurants at midnight on Friday. Yeah, so that was a big challenge for us, going from, in fact, February, we'd had our best February in 25 years. So we were really sorted a lot of problems out. We had fantastic teams, and suddenly it was like, oh, you're not going to be able to operate, so that was difficult. We couldn't, the idea of not being able to make any money, can't pay the staff, can't pay suppliers. And as these rumors were coming out, we were in the backlash of, because it all happened in China and then Italy, didn't it? Italy were really suffering bad early on, and they got into full lockdown. And because we're an Italian restaurant, we got a lot of Italians working with us. We were getting all these nightmare reports back from Italy about what a lockdown really means. So, on the Tuesday when we were told that we were going to be locked down on the Friday, a lot of fear hit, and
I know from the customers, well, from you, what I thought it was interesting that maybe talk a little bit about your driving purpose behind why you do all of this.
Well, I think that we've been talking with David and Gabrielle a lot over the last few days about sort of what is the ultimate why. If you look on the Mobius loop, and it's really exciting for me to start to understand this Mobius loop, because we've been using it to try to tell the story and deconstruct what I've been doing using this. Do you call it a framework, Gabrielle?
I call it a navigator because a framework feels very rigid. I like the idea of a navigator, but it's all built on an open innovation platform. So this way you can construct your own model. And I like integrating different models into it rather than saying there's one perfect path, because if you're trying to innovate in a startup or a war zone, we have there's a common pattern, but I think you need that both structure and freedom. So I would call it more of a navigator. It helps you find the right path in very different situations.
Yeah, and I think the navigators really helped me to understand the navigator, to deconstruct the story and then rebuild it again in Mobius. So I think that's probably a very good way to kind of look at case studies and so on. But yeah, I mean, serving the community came out as our big why. Being of service, and I mean a greater community as well, the team members, our suppliers, and anybody who comes into contact with us. I mean, I think that's our big driving force has always been to be of service.
Well, it's a domino effect, because even though it seems like a small business, this little restaurant in London, actually the knock-on effect, because if your staff loses their jobs, it impacts their family, it impacts the suppliers, all the people working for them. So it's this cascade of failure, that the idea that you just stay paralyzed and wait for someone else to take control, because I know everybody in the UK thought, well, are we getting government bailout money or not? So I love that Ricardo kept to his core purpose. So, his outcomes are going to change at the beginning, but really it becomes simple. You need to keep the lights on, you need to keep people in work, and do that within the legal constraints. So what did that look like for your customers? So I'm going to put this photo up. I was coming back from Japan from a trip when all of this was hitting. And when I went into Sainsbury's, a UK supermarket chain, of course, we were all taking pictures of the toilet paper, the loo paper roll aisle. But even things like, flour, things were missing. It was just this Armageddon. I think that brought home to me what the real problems are. And you're very customer driven. So these challenges you put down, tell us more about how it was for your customers.
Yeah, I think it was really, really scary for a lot of people, and especially I think a lot of our regular customers and a lot of people in our neighborhood are in their later years, and quite a few of them alone. And I think that prospect of everything shutting down, and it was really weird to see our neighborhood shut down so quickly. All the shops just suddenly gone. And I think there was that element of people being worried about cooking, how they're going to get food, how are they going to get the basics of, even loo roll, and as you said, and flour and pasta and silly things like that. And we were able to actually get hold of these pretty quickly for our customers. And so we decided we were going to do whatever we could to stay in business. I don't think anybody really likes to be told what to do. But definitely for us, it was a bit of a challenge, just saying, okay, how do we stay open? How do we sort of morph what we're doing to stay alive? We wanted to make sure that customers were getting good quality, healthy food as fast as possible, staying safe, connecting with the community. I think that was a really big one. I think that connecting with the community, and I always like to think of us being a sort of beating heart of the community. We're showing some life when everybody was having problems, just really trying to stay strong and positive and just be around, setting a good example in a way. Although some people thought it was a bad example because we should have been locked in the house, but
well, you were being safe, but still keeping things going. Yeah. So now let's move into the decision pivot. So you've been told you have to close your doors. You do not have a business. What were the first things you did? If you could walk us through that.
Well, we're kind of looking at what could we do, get the team together. We've got a whole team together. We're blessed to have Zoom. We've been using Zoom since back in 2016, so it's great. And so all my team members are used to it. So get everybody on the call. What can we do? And we have been doing home delivery for a number of years, and so we just said, okay, we can ramp that up. That will be good. But what else? Can we turn the restaurant into a deli stroke supermarket and start to supply some of these items that had a big shortage? And the answer was yes. So we quickly, as Gabrielle said, she sort of like, we like to jump in the car and go and see things. So I grabbed my chef, and within half an hour we were down at the local supermarkets that we thought were doing a good job. And I wanted to show him the sort of things that I'd been meaning to do for a long time. And it was like about midway down on our backlog, our list of prioritized tasks, which we probably would have come to in about a year's time, maybe a year and a half. But it was very exciting to actually have the opportunity to do it now. So he said, okay, we're going to create some beautiful pre-cooked meals, turn the restaurant into a deli, get some really nice fruit and vegetables, and start to organize the restaurant in that way.
And what about the deli idea? And again, I love this because there's something about Ricardo's thinking. Instead of being, if only things were different, why did this happen to me? It's very victim mentality. You've got this, when I spoke to Ricardo during this time, he said, oh, it's a challenge. It's fantastic. It's so much fun. And here's this, what if we turned our restaurant, who else is open? Let's just turn it into a deli supermarket. And the staff have this, it's very infectious. I'm glad David's on his side, because probably a cult leader or something, but he gets everybody involved. So this, I was watching, and David just immediately went to Facebook Live. So it looks like they've got a protest rally, but he's with one of the people, Pasha, I believe, and they're just out in the streets marching around saying, we've got takeaway. And on the right, you've got this beautiful flyer. I'll read it out in case it's difficult to see. But back to that serving the community purpose. We're here to serve you during this crisis. Anything you need, I have a whole team ready to help you in any way. Home delivery, shopping, lift to the doctor and station, emergency repairs. And he gives his personal number. And I understand your team did pitch in and do some home repairs and things.
Yeah, we did. We did quite a lot of things. Yeah, it was exciting. I think that nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew how. I mean, even down to the point when I went to go and get petrol for my car, the guy in the petrol station said that they had all the posters ready. So when they were going to shut down the petrol stations, they'd be able to put them up and give us notice. So it was really weird. We had no idea what was going to happen.
I see. I know this was an overnight transformation, but I believe you were doing this even when you still had customers in the restaurant.
We were on. People came in for what they called the Last Supper, so that was quite interesting. And while they were doing that, we were trying to figure it out. That was on midnight of the 20th. I think it's a Friday the 20th. I think that's of March, and I don't know if that's actually the right date or not. But anyway. So we were moving tables around, but we knew most of the people, so they were happy. And we're trying to explain to them as we went along, this is what we're going to be doing. And oh, David, there you are. Hello.
we got to use the 2 as 1, 1 as none strategy. So our apocryphal words this morning paid off. So we'll go to David so you can say hello.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize that I literally turned everything off, rebooted, re-kicked it. My son is running from the house screaming because my IT guy, I'm cursing him. But anyway, everybody, I'm delighted to be here. And I'll let Ricardo go through his story a little bit, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about my background and where I come into the Mobius loop a bit later.
Perfect. And please do interrupt at any time, David, and just as we go along. But yeah, we were halfway through the service, talking to customers. They were asking us what we were doing. We're very concerned about this kind of social distancing seems to be such a big element, but we didn't really know what it meant at the time. So we were trying to build the deli between tables to give people a distance. And then obviously the next morning we came in and we got all our deliveries and started to convert the restaurant into a deli.
And I think this is what being already very agile gave you, is the whole team can just pitch in and do things, and everybody works autonomously to create this. And that's part of creating that adaptive, innovative mindset.
Yeah, I think it's that that idea that change is exciting, stimulating, invigorating. The team really, they like to do new things, and they're used to it. It's in the DNA of the teams now to get used to sort of changing stuff on a day-by-day basis.
So as you come around the loop, you've run your first experiment, pushed your restaurant deli live. So what was the feedback from your customers on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're constantly, especially in those days, trying to validate what we're doing, and make sure that we're kind of on track. Find out what's needed and wanted and deliver that, and then get feedback as quick as you can. So that's kind of, we were phoning customers, speaking to people on a regular basis. Every single customer who came in through the doors, we were taking their contact details so we could email them, telephone them, asking them to please get in touch with us. That flyer that you gave with my mobile number, we were just giving those out to anybody who walked in through the doors anyway, so they'd have a better idea. And I was getting a lot of telephone calls, a lot of texts. I mean, hundreds a day. So it was pretty. I felt like one of these stock market traders. I was like constantly on one phone and the other. But it was an exciting time in one way because we were just so busy. We didn't get time to think about anything, and I think that was probably a good thing.
And I think that's good for leadership to keep in mind, that keeping people busy keeps them distracted. So I think that was a key part of back to looking after your community. So
yeah, I think that thing as well. We kept saying, that distinction. Do you play to win or do you play not to lose?
Mm.
Of course, on one level, you have to play not to lose because we knew we couldn't go up to full full capacity straight away. So we're trying to plug the hole, but at the same time, trying to get that winning attitude. We know we could be here for a very, very long time. How do we develop the skill set that allows us to survive? And at the same time, always talking to the team about this entrepreneurial spirit. How can they learn to be business owners for themselves? I think that's a real key for where we want to go.
Now, one of the things is, as you learn and adapt, I actually think in reality, and one of you guys said this, he said it was so much more chaotic than it looks here. We had so many small innovations and things that Ricardo probably didn't even know the team were doing. So these are the major ones. And this learning pushed you back as you uncovered new challenges. So tell us about what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, we're so spoilt in London. We get daily deliveries of everything from all over the world. And then suddenly you've got suppliers saying, because we've got one supplier of organic produce in Wales, and they're saying, oh, we're only doing one delivery a week. And so, we're out of eggs, we're out of a lot of produce. Then team members, chef's wife is pregnant, and she was terribly worried about him coming into work and catching something. So they said, okay, straight away, you've got to go home. So we start losing team members. And we have one chef, the chap in the picture there, Pietro. And at this point, he's been working 7 days a week for several weeks, and he's getting tired, but we've only got one guy. And other opportunities, like we're being asked could we support the local hospitals? And there was a charity set up to ask us if we would supply them with food and other products. And I think that's something you asked me to Gabrielle, to say, how do we handle that? So when the decision the question came in, could we handle it? It was just a group WhatsApp, and then get everybody on Zoom, and then, hey team, are you tired? Can you cope with more responsibility? Are we doing too much? Can we take this on? I mean, I know we're all volunteers, and so I don't want to push something on you. So, it's not this sort of command and control environment. And the team were incredibly responsive, and they said actually they'd rather be serving the hospitals and the intensive care workers and the ambulance drivers than customers, and so that was really good, and that was a no-brainer for them. But really nice that they were involved, I think, in the decision, and they have been all along at every stage. Every time we try to do something new, we're involving the whole team in whether that should be done or not.
Okay, so then you take on this whole new customer segment in the middle of chaos and decide you will do it. And what I love about this picture, I said to Ricardo, how did that come about? And it's I don't know if you're familiar with the walking skeleton, but this idea of doing a thin end-to-end run. So he just naturally does this stuff, and he jumped in his car with some meals, went straight to the hospital and took it all the way through. He said, yeah, I was really curious, what's going to happen with security? What about, health? How does that work? So he did this initial run just to find out, is it even possible, and make the complexity known. And this is where you're doing actually hospital runs. And I had to put the picture of Bobby the dog in there. Tell us about Bobby.
Well, Bobby's a rescue dog. I've had her for coming up for 3 years, and she comes with me everywhere now. And she's been great support to everyone, even though she nips us sometimes, but she's very cute. But this scene here, chap sitting next to me is one of our regular customers. He comes in every Sunday with his family. His name's Paco. He's a banker, and he always ran Pizza Friday for his team. And so he said, in tradition, and he wanted to do something to contribute. Could he deliver 50 pizzas to the Royal Brompton Hospital? And he did that three weeks in a row, and paying full price and wanting to contribute and help us out as well. And we'd fill up the car with pizza and flour and loo roll and lots of other things like lentils and things that they needed. And I think kind of interesting that going back a little bit, when we did our first deliveries, we thought we were delivering to individual people. And the idea was that we'd be outside the hospital giving people individual meals because they didn't have time to pick up anything they needed to eat. But then it transpired that they relaxed their rules about getting outside food in for sort of food hygiene purposes, and we were able to then deliver to them. But they were unhappy because we were delivering everything in individual units. And so I asked the charity people, could I speak to the hospital direct? They were delighted for me to do that. But then we found out, oh no, we're putting all of this in our canteen. So we're actually taking all of your nice individual containers and decanting them out onto our big tray. So in 1 second, it kind of it reduced the workload for us by a factor of about 10. So it was really useful.
But I think why that's important, it's that constant getting as close as you can to the customer. So when things get handed over the fence, so again, that whole journey, if just you have some people coming up with requirements, in this case, the charity saying this is what the hospital wants, that message gets lost in translation. So the closer you can get to your customers and ask them, why do you need it? I always love being in that why discovery loop. When someone says, we need these things at a certain time and all these very complex meals. And when you say why, well, because, it takes us a long time to get them out, and you find out there's a much quicker way. So this is about understanding the outcomes and finding the simplest path, do the least amount to get there. But again, you have to be very customer driven to do that, to understand what's going on. So tell us, again, what's happening with the business? I'm really curious because you were an incredibly popular restaurant. I know it's hard to even get reservations there. And what's happening with your some of your business outcomes? What were you tracking? Was it about revenue, customers? What were the things that became important?
Well, we're starting to do, daily and bi-daily profit and loss statements, making everything visible to the teams, really working out what our burn rate is with no income. We've never really had to do that before, we've never been closed, not for a day in 25 years. Apart from Christmas Day and New Year's Day, we're open every other day of the year. So it's kind of like a really bizarre situation to be in. We figured out I think our burn rate is a shade under 4,500 a week. It was like, okay, how can we plug the holes, and that's what we've been trying to do. So.
And now this part, I think will be great because we can bring David into the conversation. And I encourage people in the audience, if you want to put some questions up, because you look at this going, well, that's a lovely story. It makes you feel good. It's nice. But I think under the covers, this is sort of the backstage view, what created the ability to do this? Because again, if you think of all the restaurants you know, everybody closed their doors and they stayed paralyzed. They didn't take action. So what is different about both Ricardo himself and his leadership style and about how the things that he had built up to over the years will help? And the reason we want to go through this is not just to help your immediate customers. I mean, again, I think our greatest service to the community as sort of Agilists together is to help people right now, but also taking these lessons so that you can build this idea of an anti-fragile organization, one that is prepared and ready to adapt to change, because a lot of us might hope that things will go back to the way they were, but I think the world's changed forever. So we've got to work in a slightly different way and bring these learnings together. So now I'm going to get you to maybe talk through this idea of creating purpose and what that has meant to you in your as commander in the military, David.
Well, if you just go back a slide, because I missed a bit at the front, which I just want to say to everybody, and apologies for my IT snarl up. But I first met Gabrielle in 2013, and my last job before leaving the military was the deputy commander of UK Special Forces. I commanded 2,500 people in a war zone for 6 months. And what struck me about how close to the way that we, the military, have evolved in operating. And of course, most people's perception of the military is that we're very hierarchical, and indeed that's probably true for the majority of the military. But within special forces, pretty much globally, it's a very flat structure. We're very small in nature anyway, and we're often very dislocated from our command point. So autonomy exists right down at the lowest level, and it's one of the ethos around which we operate. The thing I like about this loop, though, is that in a sense, when you start on the left-hand side at the top and come round and eventually conduct your operations or your delivery piece, that loop on the right is continuous. So it's not like you then go straight back over to the left again and kind of reinvent yourself, but you're actually carrying on doing that delivery, just as Ricardo has demonstrated in his story, or in my case, conducting operations. But at the same time as you're doing that, you're going back and reassessing what's happening. So the situation awareness, what's happening actually on the ground, are our outcomes still the same? And do we need to make any changes to that? And you feed that back into the operation. And what's a quick example really be that in the early days in Iraq, the military, even special forces, very much framed around conducting single operations. So essentially you go around the loop, you decide what it is you're going to do, you conduct the operation, you come back, you review the operation, etc., debrief review, and you make any adaptation changes you need to do, and you're back out again the following night. What we were discovering, though, was that actually the enemy were thinking faster than we were, and their ability to adapt and change needed us to adopt a completely different mindset. So whilst the right-hand loop was continuing, we had to think about what we could actually do to really exploit the situation in a way that we retain the upper hand. And so what we discovered was actually that we needed to do was to not just conduct one operation, but based on the intelligence that we took from that particular site in the moment, then be able to conduct another operation almost straight away, and sometimes 2 or 3 times over the course of a night, and sometimes in the early morning. So it was a completely pivoting the way that we normally operate in order to make sure that we were actually able to achieve the outcomes that we were looking for from our actions on the ground. So when we talk about multi-learning in that context, it's just to bear that in mind, that the loop, once you go into the right-hand side, that continues. And what you do by going back into the left is to adapt and change and decide what else that you need to do. And I think if you go to the next slide, I think what Ricardo demonstrated here was a real sense of purpose. Okay, the thing that fundamentally for me, what I love about his story was that he never swayed from his purpose, which was to contribute to society, be that pinnacle point of society, and get food to where it needs to get, quality food to where it needs to be fast. That never changed. And so that sense of empowerment and belonging that his team had in making that happen basically drove everything that they did. In the military terms, what we talk about commander's intent. This is where the commander gives an idea of how he sees this actually happening on the ground. So Ricardo would have said, look, here are some ideas I've got. This is how I would like to see this happening. But that's not a constraint. That is just a potential jump point for then people to get engaged. There is obviously a boundary because there are certain things you can't do. And in Ricardo's case, that was probably part of the government saying this is what you can and cannot do. But there's also, as a business, there are certain things you can and cannot do. So, but within that contextual boundary, the commander's idea, that sense of purpose, is what actually motivates people then to be able to think about what we can actually do to contribute to that journey.
Can't hear you, Gabrielle.
Sorry, we're getting a bit of feedback, David. Might be a little bit from yours. You might just want to turn down the volume a tiny bit. I'm not sure. Creating purpose. Now, this is something, it's so popular. Let's create a purpose-driven organization. But somehow you are both living the values. And as we remember, it's roll up your sleeves, jump in. Everybody's at the same level within the business. But how do you bring that into an organization, especially a restaurant, where you have high churn of people? And this isn't usually a career move to be working in a restaurant. So how do you both inject purpose and keep that going and use that in a crisis? Because that's what we want to take back to our customers too. How do we bring this to the fore?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think when we decided to flatten our organization, we told the team members, look, there are no managers here. You're going to have to figure out things for yourself. So really need you to learn to be leaders and followers simultaneously. I think that's just the type of discussions we were having. We were creating the type of environment where that could happen and telling team members, look, if you are entrepreneurial, and I believe a lot of you are, and a lot of the younger ones are very entrepreneurial, can we create an environment where you're really learning how to run your own business so that one day, as we said, that people aren't professional waiters anymore. In my dad's day, and when I first went into the business, people would do restauranting as a career, but they generally don't do that anymore, especially not at the waiter level. They'd normally go to a management training school or whatever. So they all want to do something else. And so I think I think the thing that I keep telling people is that don't wait until you've got your own business to learn to be a business owner. Do it now and experiment with me so that you can learn right now, and I'm going to benefit, but at the same time, you're going to benefit as well. So it's kind of like almost running training in that way so that they get a bigger vision for themselves rather than just coming in to serve customers in a restaurant.
Yeah, and I got that from your team when they said exactly those words were played back when Ricardo wasn't there. And they said, this is a challenge, it's fun, we're learning new skills, we really love it. So that's obviously getting quite embedded. And you reminded me of a story, just a quick aside, but getting people to this idea of a higher purpose. So I was speaking to someone who worked at a company called Trainline. Essentially, they sell train tickets in Europe. And this guy, Ian, this amazing product owner, and he said, you've got to have a sense of purpose. He said, what gets you out of bed in the morning? And he said, people think we sell tickets, but actually what we're doing is selling the ability for people to be able to travel. And by being able to travel, they can understand the world, they understand other cultures, and hopefully we create understanding and we create peace in the world. So I felt like, I should go and work at Trainline. I felt so engaged in that message. So somehow getting that across to people, getting people to understand why we do these things and get out of bed in the morning. So the other key ingredients, I'm going to keep us moving in the interest of time, but then we can come back to questions. But this enabling autonomy. Now, when I spoke to Ricardo, I already knew a bit of the backstory and that everybody repurposed and learned each other's jobs so that instead of just being a barman, you could work in the front of house to the point that if a customer comes in and no one's around for whatever reason, even the accountant could pitch in and help. So tell us about how you created that level of autonomy and what it takes to do that.
It was very exciting, and it was almost a byproduct of something else. When my managers left, which they did very quickly after I came back from my second Scrum training, they realized they didn't want to give up any power, so they admitted that, and they left. And I said to the team, do you want to have a go at managing your own rota? And they said, yeah. And they managed to get together and do in an hour what would have taken a manager about 20 hours to do. And since then, they've managed their own schedules. But I told them in that meeting that they could have as much holiday vacation as they wanted, on the condition that there was a qualified person that could run the shift for them, who had the same the same skill set as them. And then it was really interesting because they started training each other. And before that, they'd been very protective of their roles. Barman wanted to be a barman and the waiter wanted to be a waiter. But suddenly when they realized that it would buy them freedom and freedom to choose when they could take time off and have holidays, etc., then I think it was a very, very exciting time for them. So they naturally taught each other their jobs.
Yeah, and I think that the example that I shared with you all, the idea that we could do multiple operations, over the course of a night, only worked when the commander actually became the enabler, not the leader. So his job really is that the commander was to enable that to happen by giving the autonomy down to the lowest level, so they could make the decision as to what they needed to do. And in many cases, once we came off the target, we had people actually, as they were walking to the helicopters to get in to go to the next place, were coming up with their plan, discussing with the team on the ground, and really just quickly improvising, and then going off and doing it. Whereas before there'd be briefings, there'd be briefbacks, so the only way that you build momentum and speed is to create that level of autonomy.
And we have two questions from the audience I'd like to bring up. So Diane Vista says, would you say that a traditional career is out of date? And what do you tell people who still ask for it? Because again, we're thinking probably about organizations where people say, I'm an architect, I'm a manager with this title. So how do you deal with this idea of cross-skilling and everybody being able to do each other's jobs?
I think that if I've understood the question right, is what's the career progression?
Or how do you answer that question when instead of your power coming from having this title, how do you say that it's in our best interest to all act together in this adaptive way? I mean, I know you said the vacation policy, right? That was a bit of an incentive that you can go on vacation if someone else can do your job, but is there more to it? Because I think a lot of people don't like relinquishing. It's their identity, work is their identity and been in that career path.
Yeah, I think that it's a certain type of person likes to work in that environment, and it doesn't appeal to everybody. And I think that the type of people who have to leave their ego at the door and really just turn around and say, but I think that for me, and I really mean this, because we make everything transparent 100%. So we give everybody access to our P&L. They get to see all the information that we could possibly, that we could have. So I think that for me, it's more just saying, do you want to one day have your own business, or at least have the ability to be able to have your own business?
And I think Gabrielle, that goes well with the next slide, which is that sense of mastery, right? I think the fact that you have such an incredible grounding and understanding of the organization and the business, it's then, the world's your oyster. There's just so much you could do, that you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I think one thing this reminds me of, Ricardo, is something interesting that Ricardo did. And he said they opened up the P&L, this radical transparency. But I know that 25% of the profits gets shared out amongst the team. And part of how they decide how it gets appropriated, and part of that is the more skills you have, the more value you provide to the team. And I've seen that model a little bit. One of the Scandinavian banks I heard about through Beyond Budgeting had something similar, and some of the successful, very agile companies like Pivotal, I know these people have done some sort of profit sharing. So people realize they've got this shared goal with a purpose and this unity that it's very transparent and helping. So I wonder if that helps promote it to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I've realized that actually my team members are not actually that interested in money. As long as they earn enough money that they can pay their bills, they're much more interested in the environment in which they work. But I think because I have a very specific type of person working in our organization.
Okay, and just let's move on. This is just an example of autonomy at work. It's like a craft shop at Ricardo's. It's a restaurant, but they've gotten so used to fixing and doing everything themselves that when they need to make signage or anything, they can do that quickly. I want to touch on mastery because I think this is one of the key elements. And you'll notice we've gone through autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which Dan Pink talks a lot about, but it did fit the model and what we did here. So tell us just quickly about this idea. I want to see what's going on also with that pizza oven out of order. Tell us about that. I love the story.
Well, I think this idea of swarming, we often show a video of the Formula One pit stop and say, this is what it should look like. When a customer comes in, or especially a group of customers come in, can everybody swarm around and help, no matter what department they're in? We realize that the constraint in a restaurant business is that you only make money when a customer's in the restaurant. So anything else can be done outside of that time. I think that team members really get that. We try to play around a little bit to work on people's expertise by switching off vital pieces of equipment in the middle of the service, or taking a very experienced team member and saying, come and sit down with me, you're going to sit with me for an hour and see what happens, right in the middle of a very busy service. And it really shows you your weak points. And it showed them as well that what happens, they get to see firsthand what happens when they're not there. So if they're not enabling people and helping people to get better and better at their jobs, then when they're having a day off, this is what it looks like, and
it's that many small crises. I know Toyota works in this way, that you kind of push things to the limit, because by building this adaptive mindset, so when something goes out, and I think it would be kind of terrifying to work in a restaurant when in the middle of the shift, a busy shift, he takes out the 2 pizza ovens and you just have to figure out how to use something else. And he said, maybe we could turn off the water. And I saw this little light bulb, like, maybe I'll do that soon in the middle of the pandemic. So good luck to you. David, I know you use this technique in the military as well. So you have this idea of, what do you call it?
Well, there's 2 levels of it. I mean, one is the sort of immediate action drills, which is what Ricardo does showing here. The other is where you, a slightly high level, you actually have a team that play the enemy. And so in a sense, what they try to do is predict what you're going to do, and then, if you like, put in place a countermeasure. And so you're constantly gaming your plan against an enemy and trying to outthink them within the constraints of that scenario. So, and this is very illustrative of that. But what I love about Ricardo's thing is, in a sense, as a business, just in the same way as a team, no one is that single point of failure. Actually, success is everyone doing something.
Okay, and I see, do we have time for one more question, Ricardo? Sarah? I see someone saying, how did you communicate during the crisis about autonomy? You consider them an autonomous team before the crisis, or is this something they demanded and just responded autonomously?
No, we pretty much try to push decision making down to the lowest level. So from day one, we're training team members to make decisions in the front line. So anybody who deals with a customer is empowered to make decisions, business decisions, from their first day at work. So somebody's saying, I don't hear anything and the videos aren't moving. Anyway, yeah, we're trying to get the whole team to be mini leaders, basically, and just develop their leadership skills so that they can make decisions in real time.
Okay, any last wrap-up words, David and then Ricardo? And we've got 2 minutes, so we're just going to make it.
No, all I'd say, I think for me, Mobius is both a tool and a process that connects strategy with delivery, but has at its heart innovation. In other words, you've got to continually think of new ideas, new ways to make it really work and really be impactful. And that requires a team that's really embedded with a single purpose. And I think Ricardo's story beautifully illustrates that.
And Ricardo?
Well, I just think it's fascinating. I mean, going back onto this Mobius thing, I think it's a really, really amazing thinking tool, and it's certainly something I'm going to be using a lot moving forwards. And I think it's going to really enable. I think that the thing is, we discussed this before about losing your sense of direction sometimes. You know, we've been morphing our offerings so quickly and so much in the last 10 weeks that sometimes you don't even know what business you're in. And I think going back to that why all the time, going on to the left-hand loop and going on to the why, I think has been incredibly helpful insight and something we're going to be using a lot.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us. I love that you had the story you could share with us. If people want some follow-up, I'm sure we'd be happy to do a bit of a webinar. There's a bit of a deeper dive, and we lost David at the beginning, so we'd be happy to help you out. So let us know how we can help you. But thank you, Saurabh, for inviting us.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, David, for joining us here. And we'll take a 5-minute break until we start or continue with Pete Behrens. He has some interesting stories to share about Agile leadership. Thank you, guys, again.
Thank you.
We'll stop the broadcast now. See you back in 5 minutes.